Well, welcome to another episode of The Billy Ho Show. Now, when I was a boy and at school, we used to play a game that I can't remember the name of it, but anyway, I'd have somebody on my shoulders and other boys would get people on their shoulders, and you spent the whole time with the person on top grabbing the other person and trying to pull them down. I'm not sure what that's called, but if you know, there's my contact details. Just flick me an email and tell me what it's called. I'm sure somebody out there knows what it was called. And then there was another game we played called Kingasini, which was before Bull Rush. The game was called Kingasini, and that was where all the kids all lined up and somebody in the middle, and they called out somebody, and then they chase them around and bring them down, and then they joined the group in the middle. So there's two, and then you call somebody else until just about everybody's in the middle, and the last person's got to get through the whole lot of them to the other end. And if that person did that, then everybody else was alive again, and they all went back and started all over again. So the object of the exercise was to get the other end to free up everybody else. But that was called Kingasini in our time, and then it became Bull Rush, and then it became Band. I don't know how you play Band, but anyway, that's that's what happened. Anyway, we're going to continue with our look at the old trucks in America, and then I've got a very special treat for you coming up into the show, and then we'll go back and have a look at some old trucks in a place called Brooks. So let's continue the truck show. In 1946 and 47, thereabouts, 48, they brought a whole bunch of ex-military GMCs into the country, 6x6, 4x4. This has still got that same cab from that era, so this must be about 1949, 1950, maybe 51, but it's gone to this really elaborate GMC grille on the front of it, a bit like a Diamond T grille, all chrome and what have you on the front. So maybe GMC was trying to compete with Diamond T and others that were, making a bit more bling with their trucks. And there's a truck we all know and love, the old jail bar Ford, and looks like it was a fire truck tanker with a tanker on the back and a roll of hoses on the top of that again. But they even got those in America. Wow. And look at this, an R190 in America. Wow, hidden amongst all these other trucks. And on the left-hand side here is, you might remember we did a story in Christchurch where we looked at an auto car that had been a wee bit bent, bonneted auto car. Well, there's that same truck there, looking a lot better than the one we looked at. You can just see where the logo went above that grille, and that's a logging truck from yesterday. But just along here I can see the nose of a K-Series International sticking out. So amongst all these bonnets we're getting back into the 1940s as well, a bit like that jail bar Ford. But let's go along and have a look at this K-Series International. Look at this, a K-Series International, gone past its day. It's got a tank on the back, so it may have been part of the fire service. It's painted red, so who knows, but that's sitting there. And next door is an old Kenworth, still got the same doors as everything else of this era, but I'm just looking at the mud guards. The Kenworth with a mud guard like that, and I'm just wondering, have Diamond T, with all their style, got ahead of Kenworth with sales, and so Kenworth has decided, well, what are we going to do? And so, well, let's make the same sort of mud guard as everybody else. The Mac looked like this, Diamond T looked like this, and it's even got the headlights with a little, exactly the same as the Mac and the Diamond T, with a little side light sitting up on the top. And this Kenworth's got the old KW logo, big steel grille surround, and next door is another heavy duty Mac by the look of it. David Hull on the door, so it's been a dump truck in its time. There's logging truck, this has been a logging truck, and that old International's been a tank carrier, and there's still a lot more trucks to look at here, so while we're here, let's make the most of it. I think I've discovered something. This is the Kenworth with the mud guards and on the mud guard light, and the doors and the windscreen, and this has got the same door, same windscreen, except we've now come to the fiberglass body. So we've gone from this to this, and so we've found the link now that joins this the model after this, I suppose, is this one. And then of course they just modernise as they go up. And there are a couple of more models of Kenworth that we recognise, but just looking at the beginnings of Kenworth, looks like they came with mudguards and then went to this. But the doors, just like the doors that are on the Peterbilts and even the autocar, they all got that narrowish looking window and a couple of strakes along the sides. Interesting. And there you go. I think I've found the evolution of Kenworth. One of the interesting things about American trucks these days is they're all bonneted. There's a few cab overs, but they seem to have gone out of making cab overs. But this cab over behind me here is a Freightliner. And we saw a Freightliner earlier, and I thought it was just the most intimidating vehicle on the road. And this is probably up there with it as well. It's all steel bars and louvers in the front, big white Freightliner. So Mr. White and Mr. Freightliner obviously have got together at some stage, and White's fallen off and it's just become Freightliner. But a cab over Freightliner, you don't see these in New Zealand. In fact, you don't see them anywhere except here. But let's have a look in the cab. It's got a decent sort of a step on it, I must say. This is the passenger side, of course, because the left-hand drive. But a little bit of a handle there. Yeah. Swing yourself up into here, no worries. Well, it's certainly a wide cab, and right in front of me is the air cleaner. So if I was the passenger, I'd be putting my feet up on the air cleaner to relax a bit. And like the big Leylands, it's all full of engine between me and the passenger. I got in okay, so I suppose I can get out okay. So here's another big photograph of Billy Ho's bottom. And at the back of this Freightliner you can just see there's the top of the bonnet goes above that, and there's the engine's tucked up in there. But in later times, of course, they've lifted the cab above that, so there's plenty of air to get across the top, but they hadn't thought of that at this stage. So there you go. I've seen photographs of these things, never thought I'd actually be sitting in one, so that's a bit off my bucket list. But a Freightliner, a really early model. Well, actually it's a white Freightliner, so White and Freightliner got joined up somewhere along the line when White fell off, and Freightliners are still on the road today. In fact, I have to say there's probably more Freightliners on those motorways that we've been driving along than any other truck. Kenworth make a heavy duty truck, as we know. It's got the checker plate mudguards, and some of them have the mudguards that actually stand out, and they're for the logging and the rest of the heavy duty stuff. And the round town jobs just had the moulded fiberglass. But this is to me looks like a very old Kenworth. It's even got a different logo on the front. It's actually got the whole word Kenworth in a circle on the front there. Steel mudguards. Still got the same door that looked like it was universal to all the trucks. Very narrow cab, that's for sure. Great big steering wheel, twin sticks, and lots of little dials and switches, as you would expect in a Kenworth. One little window in the back there to see who's coming along behind. It's got a big stanchion on the back there for the logs. So this too would have been a logger in its time, but even so, it's still got the little side lights attached, but it's on the side, but it's still attached to the headlight, which is on a little pedestal out the front there, covered with a piece of steel. Not sure what's in there, but probably a Cummins. But there it is, a real heavy duty early Kenworth. But just take a look at that little logo. That's completely different again. Here's another version of the big heavy duty Kenworth, except the logo on the front's changed. It's probably come forward a bit with just KW rather than the whole word. And the exhaust pipe comes up through the middle of the bonnet, bit like the old Euclids. And it too hauled logs back in its time, but another great big heavy duty thing with a big steel casing around the headlight. Next door, I think this is the next shape up from the autocar that we saw down in Christchurch and the other one just along there a bit, because the cab has changed to what's on the white and on the Western Star. It's got that slightly wrapped round shape to the windscreen, same doors, except it says Autocar across the front here. It's got the louvers. Autocar actually had two come to New Zealand, I think. One of note, which is like this, exactly like this, went to the Aotearoa zigzag to when they were making that pass that went from the west coast up to Arthur's Pass. They took away the zigzag and made it what it is today, the big bridge up the top there. But they had a short wheelbase one of these because it was the only thing that was strong enough, heavy enough and powerful enough to tow whatever it was around those little zigzags. But being the government, whatever you want, you get. So good to see another example of a autocar, and as I was saying, it's just a bit flashier than the one we saw earlier that's in Christchurch, and I'm not quite sure what they had that for, but it came to New Zealand as well. Autocar diesel, it says there, California, number plate.
I'd like to thank Casey Hull for giving us the opportunity to have a look around his collection of trucks. And I must say, they're all in an amazing state of repair, considering they've just been parked up where they stopped. The collection he has under cover is absolutely outstanding. So thanks, Casey, it was fantastic. After the break, we're going to have a look at something completely different.
Melbourne Lime, every time. Melbourne Lime, available all over the Southland district and beyond. Top grade lime that's been available year after year. Call them on 03 417 8228. The next time you need lime, think Melbourne Lime, every time. What I've got here is a copy of Talking Trucks. This is a book I wrote a couple of years ago, and it's the history of New Zealand trucking. And it's all from the programs that I did between 2013 and 2016. I'm going to let this go for $25. So it's a special. Christmas is coming up. So if you'd like your copy, there's my phone number, 027 277 0717. Just send me a text or email me, billhohepper@extra.co.nz to get your copy. $25 and the history of New Zealand trucks. In this part of the show, we went to a place called Macminnville, and near Macminnville is a aeroplane museum, and part of that museum is a great big aeroplane they called Hercules, and Hercules was also known as the Spruce Goose and belonged to Howard Hughes, an enormous plane made of wood that they built, through World War II and beyond World War II, and it actually flew. They got permission to fly this thing, and Hughes, they were just supposed to just taxi it, but he sped up a bit and got about this far off the ground and then in the air for about 30 seconds and then came down, but he just wanted to prove that the thing could fly. So let's go and have a look at the Hercules. We've arrived in a place called Macminnville, which is in Oregon and not far from Portland, and we couldn't resist coming into this air museum, which has aeroplanes of all sorts and sizes and jets, and the space museum. But the highlight for me is the Spruce Goose, and the Spruce Goose was built about 1938 by Howard Hughes, and the idea of it was to transport soldiers from point A to point B, but it took so long to build. I think it was ready in 1947 or something, so the war's been and gone. But the whole thing's made of wood, and it is just enormous. You've got no idea. You have to be here to see this thing. So if you have any passion for aeroplanes, I think you should put this place on your bucket list. 1, 2, 3, 4 engines up there, 4 on the other side, and there is footage, and they tell me that this thing got off the ground by about 20 feet in a test flight and then came back down again. So it did fly, it did get off the water. It's a waterborne aircraft, so I think we should go and have a look inside. And here's another machine of the 20s and 30s called a Stoughton, and there's lots of one-off trucks. I guess it's just another one. And look at that tail structure up there. It's just enormous. That's all I can say. This thing is enormous. Put it on your bucket list. Let's go and have a look inside. And here's a model of it being built. All the scaffolding down the side there, and as I was saying, the whole thing's made of wood, and I don't know what sort of wood. And here's a model of the wing being built. They've stood it on its edge, and there's scaffolding and planks and all sorts of things to build the wing. And on the end here, on the very end, is the floats, and even the float is a very big thing. Look at that, back in the trucking wheel we've got looks like a diamond T pulling the fuselage so they can connect the wings. And the fuselage, it says they're 200 foot long, and this is 1946, the early summer of 1946, after Howard Hughes secured a craving dock site on the terminal island of Long Beach. The flying boat was ready to leave the cargo building. So 1946 they finished, and 1938 they started. This is what it was meant for. It was supposed to transport men and machinery to the war zones, but launched in 1946, well, it's all over. We're inside the Spruce Goose, and that's heading down towards the tail. And there's just wires and wire looms, and it's just engineering going on forever. Fuel tank compartment access. All those red tubes are for fire suppression. I suppose if you're made of wood and there's a fire, you're going to burn up pretty quick. And there's a bit of a hatch down there that goes down to the fuel room. And if you wanted to check the fuel and what have you, that's where you went for that. And if we look the other way, that's looking towards the front, and you can see a stairwell that takes you up to the cockpit. But you can certainly store a lot of machines and a lot of people in here.
Engineer that sat over here, he had responsibility for making sure that all of 8 engines were at exactly the same RPM. Because Howard, in order to get it to lift off of that water drag, he had to go 94 miles an hour in order to get it to even lift. So those two guys in the day that it flew were really in tight communications.
I bet they were. I just see all these little 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's not a great deal of room between each one.
Well, you know, when you run them, you control them all.
Oh, the whole lot. Oh, yeah.
That's right.
Okay. Switches for Africa, dials for Africa.
Yeah.
Up the top. Yeah. So he must have been a really thrilled man on this day that he's going along and got it off the water a bit, knowing that he was, not allowed to.
Right. Right. He wasn't supposed to, because of course, it was publicized, and so the newspapers had written about it, and the radio had talked about it. So everybody, all the looky-loos were out there in the bay in their boats, but they were roped off by the Coast Guard. They didn't only so much.
Yeah.
So he only had so much room to be able to take off and then set it back down again. So that's why he was only in the air for 59 seconds.
Wow.
Yeah. Otherwise, if he'd have crashed into them or anything like that, the lawsuits would still be going on.
So this is for 55 seconds. All of this, the building of it, the whole 9, and here it sits, haven't gone anywhere. So those engines are practically brand new still.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right. And the only thing about it, because the era and the time that we were living in then, these engines were underpowered.
Oh, okay. Right.
They got them off the water, they got them off that drag, but to gain any kind of altitude with any kind of rapidity, forget it, because they just weren't up to it. It wasn't until a couple of years later that Pratt & Whitney came out with an engine, same size, with twice the horsepower. That would have really done the job.
And the horsepower of these was 3,000 horsepower each or
Each one.
something? Yeah. That's at 24,000 horsepower.
Yeah. But the airplane was 400,000 pounds because it was wood.
Yeah.
If it had been made out of aluminum, it would have been lighter.
A lot lighter. It must have been a day and a half for him. It's just sitting here with all this. It's all him. He's put the whole thing together, supervised the whole lot, and flown it. So that's a whole achievement, you know, of his life just come together. Not many men get to do that.
That's true, especially a guy that never went to college. He picked all this up on his own, in association with people that did go to college. And he learned all. He had been a record-breaking pilot before he even got into this. And he had the name, you know.
Oh well, the concept was good, you know, taking a lot of men to wherever and machines.
It was another step forward in technology, and this was the second place that ever used hydroelectric controls. The first airplane that did that was P-38, but this one was, it had to use something like that just to get the controls back to the flaps and the rudder and all that.
Amazing. Amazing. Oh well, thank you very, very much. And we're on the other side of the aeroplane. You can just see probably better from this side because it's not as cluttered, but the size of that tail all the way around, the 4 engines over on this side, just amazing. And they've got some old Vampires over there. You might remember the Vampire jets that flew around the place back in the day. And from the comic books that we all read in the 50s, I remember the nose of this aeroplane with the shark tooth. And here's that Vampire I was telling you about, and I'll just read what it says here. On the fuselage on this photograph here, there's a photograph of one that says NZ5731. So this belongs to the Royal Air Force, this one, but it's just interesting that they've got a photograph of a New Zealand one here, and this one belonged to the Royal Air Force. But a popular plane. I remember them buzzing around over Auckland when I was a boy, and here it is, all the way to America to see one. And that's another interesting plane just over there. This is the Spirit of St. Louis, and Charles Lindbergh flew this from New York to Paris, and I think there was a $25,000 prize for if you did it. A lot of people tried and a lot of people died, but there's no front window in this, and behind this engine is a fuel tank, and behind that was where he flew the thing. So in order to see where he was going, he had to actually turn the plane sideways a wee bit to get a bit of a view from where he's going. So just an interesting aspect. There's no forward cockpit in this plane, so he's basically flying. So he's basically flying blind. Interesting. Back in the day when you flew by the seat of your pants. We've come up on this bit of a platform so we get a better view of the Spruce Goose, and I'd just like to explain the Spruce Goose. Apparently a reporter was making fun of the aeroplane and fun of Howard Hughes, and the name Spruce Goose came out with that report, and it basically stuck. But if you mentioned Spruce Goose around Howard Hughes, you got the sack. So it was either the Howard Hughes flying boat or Hercules. Those were the two names that you could use to describe this aeroplane. And it's not actually made of spruce, it's made of birch. So there you go. But the birch goose doesn't really sound right, does it? So the Spruce Goose fits, so that's what it is. But it's just an enormous aeroplane, and if you get a chance, it's called a place called McMinnville, Oregon, just before you get to Portland, and put it on your bucket list. If you're anything to do with aeroplanes, you need to come and see this. It's a big thing. And now we're off to a place called Brooks, and at Brooks there's a truck museum, so we'll start there and we'll continue that as we go as well. So let's go to Brooks. My host is a man called Rick who lives there and looks after all these wonderful specimens of trucks, and what we've got here is Ford's first attempt at making a cab over truck, which is interesting. Note at the time they've still got this little mirror that you can sort of see out nowhere. But if we look inside this thing, just in the cab here, the engine's right in with the driver. I guess if you live in a place like this which gets cold in the winter, and I guess there's a big snow plough outside, so it's an indication there might be snow here, but having that engine right beside you in that time has been lovely and warm. Not like the R190s and trucks like that where it's really, really hot, but this is just another example of evolution of trucks, I suppose. We've gone from nose, now we get to the cab over, which means, of course, you can put more on the back. The cab's shorter, and you make more money. You get another couple of sacks of flour or whatever. But on the back of this is a very short furniture Arctic trailer, and it's got air there to operate the brakes, which is interesting. A couple of little wheels down here to crank the thing up. There's a little lever on the side there that you crank her up and pull the pin. But it's just interesting that Arctics have been around for a long, long time. You might remember the show we did down at Invercargill where they had the AA Ford, and it too had an Arctic on the back, and that was 1922 or 23 or something. So Arctic trailers have been around a long time, so it's nothing new. But what is new is this is Ford's first attempt at making a cab over. And you wouldn't want to be the offsider. It's going to be a very rough ride. It's just like sitting on a beer crate, but there is a bit of room for your legs sitting out the front there. Interesting also, it's got the twin sticks in this, so it's got a high and a low ratio and whatever gear, 3 or 4, to make it go. Rick, all the trucks, the Fords, the Chevs of this period all had the fuel tank under the seat, and I just see that the fuel tank's here, and obviously the fuel tank is under the seat as well.
Yes.
And
well, actually, on this one, they did modify some of them.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this has been modified. And I'd say it's down underneath someplace.
Yeah. But this is the time when everybody and his dog smoked.
Yeah.
You know, and you're sitting with 10 gallons of fuel underneath your bottom.
That's right. Or some of them put it right on the dash.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, right there in front of you.
Yeah, I've got a vehicle right down here that's got it right over the dash. I've had old-time mechanics coming through, and they told me this was the hardest vehicle they ever worked on.
Oh, really? Yeah, complicated. Yeah. So they just compacted the whole thing and then put everything around it. And of course, more or less got to take the truck apart to get at it.
Well, nobody considered the poor mechanic had to work on it.
But then when they built it, would have been built on a factory line. You know, it would have gone together relatively easy as long as you've got it in the right order.
Right.
Then you have to take it apart in that order just to change one bolt or whatever. It's just interesting. So they would have made a lot of extra money, I suppose, you know, having the opportunity to have a little bit longer. But yeah, now just while we're on cab overs, I noticed that most of the trucks on the road are bonneted. There's not very many long haul cab overs.
No.
And I'm guessing that's because of the fuel economy with the wind resistance. That sort of thing.
That's partially it. And a lot of your drivers do not like a cab over.
Oh, okay.
Because they say, you're the first one to the accident. They don't want to be there. They want something in front.
It's a fold up before
to
they get to
fold
them.
up before it gets to you.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, we have a lot of cab overs still in New Zealand, so and the drivers just drive whatever they're given. I guess the job's the job.
Well, on the freeways in some states, they're allowed to do 80 mile an hour.
That's a lot of impact.
That's a lot of impact when you've got a big rig.
Yeah, sure is. This is just Black Star beer.
It was actually only sold over in Idaho, Montana, but it was brewed right here in Portland. But they never sold it here.
Oh, really? Export, make more money.